The Honourable Member Chester Burrows.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Privileged to be able to tēnā koe. Privileged to be able to stand in this debate. I had an interesting week last week, and on Monday just gone, I went and spoke to the South Taranaki Grey Power, and we had a really good discussion. The South Taranaki Grey Power is a pretty feisty bunch of people. They are always happy to take it to you and ask you the hard questions when you're there to speak to them. But the fact is that South Taranaki and Wanganui over the last few years is experiencing something it hasn't experienced before, and certainly not under other governments. And that is that it's experiencing a higher level of GDP per capita than it ever has before. And funnily enough, in Wanganui's case, a higher level of employment than is the national average. This is because both areas within my electorate are built on the back of the export industry. And what we know is that under the previous government, there wasn't a single job grown in the export sector for 10 years. So looking at where that sits now is this government is focused on providing some certainty around financial policy, some certainty around people investing in the economy, and particularly in the export sector. Taranaki, and so South Taranaki as it comes into the Wanganui electorate, its economy is built on the back of dairy farming and the oil and gas industry. Those people involved in oil and gas receive a higher level of remuneration than those employed in similar jobs in other sectors. That is the nature of the industry, and it has been very, very good for our part of the world and very, very good for our country. With respect to dairying, though, that, as people know, has been undergoing a purple patch over the last few years in terms of reward for those who are involved in the industry, not only as farm owners and operators, but farm workers as well. And the big threat here comes from those promises that we've already had from the other side of the House in terms of a Labor Greens government. Because what we know then is that there will be a change to personal income tax. It will go up under a Labor Greens government. We also know that commercial tax rates will go up under a Labor Greens government. We also know that there will be changes to the labour sector and for instance, the loss of the 90-day trial, the increase in minimum wages to $15, heading towards $18 after that. We also know that there will be changes to ACC and changes to RMA. We also know that there will be an imposition of a capital gains tax, and we know that there will be increased charges for carbon. So what we know then is that electricity prices will go up as well, and the cost of doing business in this critical export area of dairying is going to become very, very heavily taxed and levied. The average dairy farm milking about 400 cows for 140,000 kilograms of milk solids is expecting then that it will pay well in excess of $2,000 per week in excess taxes and levies, and the average dry stock farm about $1,000. This is a critical thing for our electorate, and those people who we're working with and we're speaking to have got their head around that very, very well indeed. The response from the response, for instance, at the Wanganui Riverside Market was interesting too. Wanganui, as people will know, is an area that has struggled in some aspects. Its demographics are such that it has a higher than average older population. That population doesn't keep as good a health as other relative populations. It has a lesser number of people who are well educated, and they are involved in less remunerative work. So the gains that we've made from healthcare, for instance, are very, very near to the hearts of those people in Wanganui. And while many developed countries are freezing or reducing health funding, National is spending more on health than any other government in New Zealand's history, a $1.8 billion extra investment over 4 years, and takes health spending next year to a record $15.6 billion. And it's interesting to note that over the last few years of the Labor government, the Wanganui District Health Board struggled. It struggled to meet its targets, and it failed in a number of areas and was in the media for all the wrong reasons. And yet over the last 6 years it has been in the media for all the right reasons. And when you look at the measures, when you look at the traffic light index of where those hospitals are required to perform, then it is meeting all those targets and sits in about the top 5 of every DHB around the country, except for a couple of measures, mainly around smoking cessation and others. When we look at the education sector, in Wanganui, we're actually we do very well with our schools there, albeit after a lot of depopulation, there are more schools than required for the population, and there are a number of empty chairs. But what we do know is that the schools that operate within Wanganui do incredibly well. And it's good to note too that the government is investing heavily in education and recognising the expertise of teachers and principals and the ability to be able to share their expertise around the community in which they work in. Because as every electorate MP knows, you may have many schools, an electorate MP may have many schools within their electorate, and they operate at different levels. You can walk into some schools and they are absolutely humming, and you work into other schools and it's like putting on a big wet duffel coat, and to share that expertise around those schools to make sure that every child has the opportunity for the best possible results for their education is a great thing. I'd like to talk a little bit about my portfolios with respect to courts and to youth justice. Over the last few years, we have invested in courts and invested for savings, and we are seeing the results of that, which are fantastic. We've invested in the modernisation of courts, and I know that across the House we've received support for the investment that we have made. Implementing the use of technology within our courts has been a high priority for us, and we would like to one day achieve the status of a paperless court. It's some way off. Nevertheless, it's an ambition that we hold dearly. It seems ridiculous to me that the way that New Zealanders interact with their banks, pay their bills, book their hotels, air travel, a number of other things are all online, but when we have to deal with the courts, it's got to be a paper-based system, and we're moving very quickly in order to be able to change that. And an example of that, for instance, was the Environment Court's 5-week hearings in relation to the Denniston Plateau, where the whole of the court hearings was held on iPads. There wasn't any paper used through that court process whatsoever. But the big bugbear in courts is reducing waiting times and work on hand. So overall, in the last 12 months, we've seen an 8.9% drop in the time it takes for a court case to move through the district court system. That's a 16-day reduction. In the criminal jurisdiction, that's up to 18.3% or 23 days reduction in the average time of work on hand. Disputes tribunals have sped up just over 21% or 17 days quicker than they were before, and we are seeing this reflected all the way through our court system. And we have firmly between our teeth the bit that is going to take us to an even more efficient system. In collections, for instance, when we came into government, we inherited a debt book, unpaid fines, $806 million when we came into government in 2008. And now that's down to $554 million. Now, that's $554 million that are incredibly frustrating that you can't get your mitts on it. It's like knowing there's $100 stuffed down the back of your couch, but you can't quite get to it. And we're doing everything we can to ensure that we can get our mitts on that. I want to finish off with some a bit of a story around our youth justice results, because when we came into government in 2008, we sought about changing the way that we were delivering youth justice to our young people, and we received a lot of stick for it. As it went through the social services select committee, we had a lot of stick about the initiatives we were taking in the youth justice sector to extend the periods for supervision with activity, supervision with residents, and to bolt onto the back of that, the ability to be able to have therapeutic treatments around drug and alcohol, violence and abuse, and those sorts of things. And what we've found now, though, so probably the hottest one was around the introduction of MAC camps. And just to bring the Parliament up to speed with respect of our results there, the latest in the first 12 months post-MAC camp, 79% reducing frequency of offending, 16% not offending whatsoever, 81% reducing the severity of offending, and 53% reduction in violent offending. It's good to note that the heat has now gone out of this debate. Labor, the Greens and all parties on the opposition are fully in support of the youth justice initiatives that we implemented in 2008 because we are seeing the benefits of them. Thank you.
Speaker.
I call the honourable member Jacinda Ardern.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I always enjoy